Hi there, welcome back to Paginated Reports 101. This is Lenore Flower with CAF to Code, and in this video I'll be walking you through how to create your first paginated dataset and matrix data region. In our last video we went through how to make a Power BI dataset your Power BI reports data source. In this video we'll be using that data source to create a Power BI dataset, which is essentially a table built up using DAX. With paginated report datasets, the result is going to be a single table of static values. Here are a few things you want to keep in mind. First, remember that most logic built into your standard Power BI dataset for relationships, sorting, or measures, it will inform what goes into the paginated report dataset, but it's not going to carry through into your paginated report dataset. For example, if you use a sort field to make your quarters chronological for visuals in your Power BI dataset, you'll need to pull that same field to apply sorting in the paginated report. Second, flattened tables aren't as efficient as data models. Your dimensional data is going to repeat for every relevant row. And if you're thinking, boy, that could really have an impact on performance, you are correct. This is why we want to minimize the number of fields we reference and make good use of aggregations where appropriate, parameters and filters, so that we're not overwhelming the paginated report and we're only pulling the data we need. If you find later that you need another field in the dataset, you can always add it. Finally, always use measures for any values you want to see summed, averaged, or otherwise aggregated in your report. Paginated reports don't employ implicit measures the way that Power BI Desktop does. And if you use those fields from your fact table that don't have aggregations built in the way that they use for measures, you're going to have some unfortunate results. Let's go to Power BI Desktop for a moment so I can show you what I mean. So here's that original report built out in the Power BI Desktop. We have a matrix here with values associated with total quantity, average price per unit, and total sales. But we also have pulled in this quantity field, which has this lovely little sum value here. If I delete this so that I can just quickly show you, we'll add it in, and we can see that it defaults to sum. Right? And if we look over here at total quantity v quantity, we get exactly the same values the way that you would expect. Now, why is that? Total quantity is functioning as an explicit measure. We have explicitly told Power BI, I want you to give us the sum of the SMORE sales table anytime that I use this measure. But quantity has this automatic assumption applied. If we look at the performance analyzer, we can refresh the visuals and take a quick look at what the query is that's generating this matrix that allows these two to work exactly the same. Here on the left-hand side, you can see the output DAX query from the performance analyzer from the matrix. And you can see you've got some filters being applied in here. But what I really want you to focus on is total quantity, which is that measure that we looked at before that is using the sum, and sum quantity, which is the DAX calculation that Power BI did for you without you having to add any additional logic. That is how implicit and explicit measures end up providing you with the same output. If we head over to the Paginated Reports Query Designer, we can see that that same logic doesn't work in Paginated Report. Here, I'm going to choose quantity and just pull it over to the Query Designer. If I click on this here, instead of getting a sum, I get every distinct value. Whereas if I use the measure for total quantity, I will get exactly what I want, which is a single value associated with the total quantity with no slicing and dicing. Let's go ahead and add a couple additional fields so that we can see how this translates with each additional dimension. If we add customer state, this 20.5 million is going to get subdivided for each state, which we can see right here. Let's focus on Minnesota and see how that gets subdivided. So let's go ahead and add our customer name. And you can see that scroll bar expanding. We can see this Stuber group for Minnesota has about 422K. And if we add a quarter name, and quarter sort, because recall we're going to want to be able to sort that. Here we've got Minnesota Stuber Group for Q1 2022 has about 62K. Each time that we added that, the scroll bar got longer. And what that means practically is each time that we add a level of detail, a level of granularity to the information that we're pulling in here, you're going to see a longer and more extensive list of data in here, which means that your report will run more slowly once you hit critical mass. Now that we've demonstrated how dimensions impact the volume of data going into your table for the query designer, let's go ahead and add our other two key measures, average price per unit and total sales. Click to execute the query, and there we go. That is our baseline data set. We're going to get to filters and parameters in our next video, but for now, let's go ahead and hit OK. We've got a nice little simple listing of evaluate, summarize columns to give us the distinct values for each of these instances and the measures for each. I'm going to name my data set something very boring like main, validate the query, and then hit OK. Okay, now we've got our data set nicely available. Let's take a look at our options for creating our data region. Now, in Power BI Paginated Reports, even if you're used to Power BI referring to everything as a visual, you have data regions and data visualizations. Most of the time, you're going to find yourself making a data region. Lists are great when you need things to be a little bit more free-form. Tables are pretty straightforward. Matrices are what we're going to focus on today, not only because that is the starting point for the report structure that we're going to be looking at, but also because once you have a matrix down, which is the most complicated of the three, I think it's much easier to get a table or a list. So let's click on that. Rather than using the wizard, I'm going to go ahead and click Insert Matrix, and that means I could put this anywhere. I'm going to go ahead and stick it in the top left. Okay, so right away, I've got row groups and column groups right here. So let's go ahead and start by getting our data organized. We're going to grab quarter name, stick that up here in the columns. We want state to be one of the groups in the rows. And we know that we want customer name to go under state. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull it to be right next to state. That way it knows it's inside the state. There you go. See how it already knows state and then customer name, parent-child relationship sort of here. And then under quarter name, we're going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to select that cell, insert row. I want it to be inside the group because I want it to be with the quarter name below. There we go. So we're going to use this, but we're going to go ahead and insert columns inside the group to the right, and then inside the group to the right. Now we've got the quarter name and 3 boxes. Perfect. So all I'm going to do now is I'm going to move in our total quantity. Note that the title populates up here, our average price per unit, and then our total sales. I'm just going to do a tiny bit of cleanup here. We're going to save most of that for later in the videos, but just so we've got the matrix in good order. Customer name, and state. Okay, now we have a matrix structured with our quarters, parenting the quantity, price per unit, and sales. So these will repeat every time that a quarter repeats. And then states are going to have customers listed for each of these. Let's go ahead and run it and see how it looks. Okay, Not the most beautiful report, but you can see that the data is being grouped the way that you would expect, with these repeating for each quarter and with all of our states being organized with the customer names and the relevant data. Congratulations, you've successfully created a paginated report dataset off of a Power BI dataset, and you've built a matrix which runs as a functional report. Is the report done yet? No, not at all. We need parameters, we need filters, and then we're going to get to formatting and titling. But the bones are there. Join me in our next video where we'll be going through how to understand and leverage filters and parameters.